This isn't really a history or political video, but given that so much of the media that leaves North Korea is a bit doom and gloom, I thought it might be interesting and good to know some of the more light-hearted North Korean productions and pop culture. So to start off, let's go with games. The North Koreans have made a game, it's called Pyongyang Racer, and despite its graphics, it was only made in 2012. It was commissioned by a tour group, I think it was Koyo Tours, and the game was mainly built by students, and you can play it online now for free. And in North Korea they do have the internet. I think there's an internet cafe in Pyongyang, but it's usually only used by the elites, and it functions more of an intranet. But anyway, they have their own operating system called Red Star, and this is Linux based, and it was allegedly created by Kim Jong-il, and a file that comes pre-installed on the computer says as much. And the internet browser they used is allegedly just a remodeled and renamed version of Firefox. As for TV, there's only 3 TV channels in Korea, so there's not many groundbreaking productions there. But I was surprised to find out that there are some commercials. For instance, a beer commercial emerged a couple of years ago, and if you're interested, the North Korean brewery was bought from England in the early 2000s, I believe. But North Korea does make a lot of movies. This is probably because Kim Jong-il was a big fan of movies and even wrote some books about how to make them. And one of the most famous movies is Pulgarasi. Now, this is very famous because its director was South Korean, and he was kidnapped and forced to make this movie in the 80s. In terms of plot, it's just a North Korean version of Godzilla, so the monster can mean anything that you want it to be, essentially. But staying on monsters briefly, there is a North Korean version of the Loch Ness Monster called the Lake Tanchi Monster. Now, it supposedly resides on the Chinese-North Korean border, and there are some sightings in China every now and then, but it's hard to tell whether or not North Koreans still believe in it. Some of the movies you might be interested in is Tanzen, The Ultimate Mission. Now, this was made in the 80s and one of the first movies to feature Western actors. In terms of plot, it's a strange action, spy, futuristic movie, and more recently in 2012 a rom-com was produced, and it was largely funded by Westerners, I think the British and the Belgians, and it's called Comrade Kim Goes Flying. But one reason why this movie's quite important, it is one of the first movies not to have any grand purposes. I mean, it wasn't made for any propaganda purposes. And on to music. So recently North Korea produced a girl band called the Moranbong Band, and they produce more modern music, pop music and such. But they still have very anti-American lyrics, and because of that they were banned from performing in China for a while at least. Before them there were the Uhanso Orchestra and the Wang Jae-san Light Music Band. But in 2012, I think, there were reports that members of these bands were killed by a machine gun, I think. However, since these reports have emerged, one of the members who was allegedly killed has made an appearance, so it's probably not true. Finally, sports. Now, most people know that Dennis Rodman has visited North Korea, but football is the most popular sport there, and the best team is the April the 25th Club, and they've won the most leagues that we know of. And I say that because a lot of seasons we just don't know who won the title. Anyway, the April the 25th Club have a crosstown rival called the Pyongyang City Sports Club, and they play at the Kim Il-sung Stadium. There's one sporting event I think you should know, and maybe many of you do know it, but I just discovered it recently, and that's Collision in Korea in 1995. Now, this is the largest ever wrestling pay-per-view. It was organised by WCW and featured mainly Western wrestlers fighting Japanese wrestlers. So it was headlined by Ric Flair, but the Steiner brothers were also there, and there's Road Warrior Hawk and Chris Benoit. And it ran for 2 days, and on both days there was an attendance of around 150,000 people, and you can read Ric Flair's account of how the travel there went, and it's pretty interesting.